My name is Eden. I'm 27 years old, and in 3 weeks, I'll be walking down the aisle without my father. The same father who chose his new wife and her children over me. The same father who disowned me when I ran away at 16 because my stepbrother's physical abuse became unbearable. Now, after 10 years of silence, he suddenly reappeared, demanding money for my half-brother's cancer treatment. I thought I'd moved on, but his ultimatum reopened old wounds I thought had healed. Then he started blackmailing my grandparents, threatening to cut them off from seeing their grandson if they attend my wedding. Before I dive into this heartbreaking story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to a toxic family member. Trust me, what happened next changed everything. I was 5 years old when my mum died from breast cancer. Those early years are mostly a blur now, but I remember her gentle hands braiding my hair and her soft voice reading bedtime stories. After she passed, it was just me and my dad, Thomas. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in suburban Michigan, close enough to my maternal grandparents, Icots, that they could help out when Dad worked late. In those first few years, Dad really tried his best. He learned to cook simple meals, bought me pretty dresses, and attempted to braid my hair, though he never quite got it right. Every night he'd tuck me in and we'd talk about Mum keeping her memory alive. On weekends, we'd visit my grandparents, who showered me with love and homemade cookies. Grandma taught me to knit, and Grandpa would take me fishing at the lake behind their house. Dad worked as an accountant at a local firm, and though money was tight, we managed okay. He kept a photo of Mum on his nightstand, and sometimes I'd catch him looking at it with tears in his eyes. Despite our grief, we were a team. He came to every school event and helped with my homework. We had Friday movie nights with popcorn and ice cream sundaes. I felt loved and secure, even without Mum. Everything changed on my 9th birthday. Dad had organised a small party at our local park with a few friends from school. One of my classmates, Lily, brought her mum, Sandra. I remember Sandra immediately complimenting Dad on how well he'd set up the party decorations. She was tall, with perfectly styled blonde hair and bright red lipstick. She laughed loudly at all Dad's jokes and offered to help serve the cake. After that day, Sandra started appearing regularly in our lives. She'd drop by with homemade lasagna or offer to take me shopping. At first, I was excited. Sandra paid attention to me, brushed my hair the way Mum used to, and brought me little gifts. Having a woman around again felt nice, and Dad seemed happier too. His eyes crinkled when he smiled at her, and he started coming home from work earlier. Their courtship was fast. Within 6 months, Dad proposed. I was thrilled at the thought of having a mother figure again. Even better, Sandra had 2 children from her previous marriage. Jasmine was 12 and Tyler was 10. I'd always wanted siblings, and now I'd have an instant family. Dad sat me down before the wedding and promised, "Mate, this is good for all of us, Eden. We'll be a real family again." The wedding was small but beautiful. I was the flower girl in a puffy pink dress, sprinkling rose petals down the aisle. Sandra looked radiant in her cream-coloured dress, and Dad couldn't stop smiling. My grandparents attended, though I noticed Grandma watching Sandra with slightly narrowed eyes when she thought no one was looking. After the honeymoon, Sandra moved into our house with Jasmine and Tyler. This is when things began to shift so subtly at first that I barely noticed. The first sign was his bedrooms. Tyler got my old playroom converted into his bedroom, while Jasmine took the guest room. Both rooms were completely redecorated with new furniture, while my room remained unchanged, despite my hopeful hints about wanting a new comforter to match Jasmine's. I tried so hard to bond with my new siblings. I offered to show Jasmine my collection of seashells from our trip to Florida, but she rolled her eyes and said, "Those are for babies." When I asked Tyler if he wanted to play video games, he told me his games were too complicated for little kids. They whispered to each other and stopped talking when I entered rooms. Dad started working longer hours again, leaving me with Sandra and her kids most afternoons. Sandra wasn't unkind exactly, but she wasn't warm either. She'd ask me about school and make sure I did my homework, but there were no more hairbrushing sessions or shopping trips. All her attention went to Jasmine and Tyler checking their homework, first serving them larger portions at dinner, letting them choose the weekend activities. When I mentioned this to Dad one night, as he tucked me in, he seemed distracted. "Sandra has to adjust to being a mum to 3 kids now, sweetie. Her own children just need a little extra attention while they get used to our family." He kissed my forehead and promised, "Everything will settle down soon." But it didn't. Dad slowly became a stranger in our house, someone who came home tired, ate dinner with minimal conversation, and retreated to watch TV with Sandra. Our Friday movie nights became grown-up time for them while I was sent to my room. My birthday that year was a small affair with just a store-bought cake, while Jasmine's birthday the following month featured a professional photographer and a bounce house in the backyard. I tried to tell myself it would get better, that we just needed time to adjust. I decorated a special card for Sandra for Mother's Day, spending hours on it, only to see it placed on the refrigerator for a day before disappearing, while Jasmine's hasty scrawl remained displayed for weeks. I still had my grandparents on weekends though, and those visits became my lifeline. I never told them how lonely I felt at home. I didn't want them to worry or cause problems between them and Dad. By the end of that first year, the pattern was clear. Dad had a new family now, and somehow I wasn't really part of it. I was the extra piece that didn't quite fit into the perfect family portrait Sandra was creating. When I started middle school at age 10, the dynamic at home worsened. Sandra took complete control over household decisions, from meal planning to vacation destinations. We suddenly became vegetarians because Tyler had allergies, even though he mysteriously could eat pepperoni pizza at friends' houses. The walls were repainted from Mum's favourite pale yellow to Sandra's preferred beige. Mum's antique reading lamp that had always stood in the living room disappeared one day, replaced by a modern chrome fixture. Dad worked even longer hours, often coming home after I was already in bed. When he was home, Sandra commanded his attention completely. I'd try to tell him about an award I won at school or ask for help with a science project, only to have Sandra interrupt with some household crisis that needed immediate attention. Thomas the dishwasher is making that noise again. Or Thomas, we need to discuss Tyler's soccer registration fees. I became invisible in my own home. The physical bullying started subtly. Tyler would stick out his foot as I walked past, sending me sprawling across the kitchen floor. "Oops, didn't see you there," he'd say with a smirk. Sandra would glance over disinterestedly. "Be more careful, Eden. You're getting too old for such clumsiness." In the hallway, Tyler would shoulder check me into the wall. "Watch where you're going, brat," he'd hiss when no one was looking. Jasmine's tactics were more psychological. She'd roll her eyes when I spoke at dinner. "God, do you ever stop talking?" she'd complain, and Sandra would nod in agreement. Eden let others have a turn to speak. Jasmine would borrow my things without asking and return them damaged, if at all. My favourite sweater disappeared for weeks, only to resurface with a mysterious stain. My school supplies would vanish from my backpack on important test days. When I told Dad about Tyler pushing me, he sighed tiredly. "That's just siblings, Eden. You need to learn to get along." When I persisted, showing him a bruise on my arm, Sandra jumped in. "Eden has always been so dramatic, Thomas. My kids would never purposely hurt anyone. She probably bruised herself playing and wants attention. I heard them talking about me one night when they thought I was asleep." "I'm worried about Eden," Dad said. "She seems unhappy." "She's just manipulating you," Sandra replied smoothly. "My therapist friend says children from broken homes often act out for attention. If we reward it, it'll never stop." "Maybe I should spend more time with her," Dad suggested half-heartedly. "You're exhausted from working so hard for this family," Sandra countered. "Eden needs to learn she's not the centre of the universe anymore." The isolation grew worse. I retreated into books and threw myself into school activities to stay away from home. I joined every club I could. Chess club, debate team, yearbook committee, anything to avoid returning to a house where I felt unwelcome. My teachers praised my academic enthusiasm, unaware it was driven by desperation. Then came the incident with my mother's photos. I kept a small album under my pillow, pictures of Mum and me that Dad had given me after she died. One day I came home to find the album on my bed, water damage staining several pages, the images warped and faded. Sandra was in the kitchen when I ran downstairs clutching the ruined album. "What happened to my photos?" I demanded, tears streaming down my face. She barely glanced up from chopping vegetables. "Oh, Tyler mentioned spilling something in your room earlier. Accidents happen, Eden. These were the only pictures I had of my mum," I sobbed. Sandra put down her knife with a sigh. "Don't you think it's time you moved on? It's been years and your constant dwelling on the past isn't healthy. Besides, you have me now." I was speechless with rage and grief. These weren't just photos. They were my connection to my mother, proof she had existed, that she had loved me. I ran to my room and cried myself to sleep. When I told Dad that night, he promised to print new photos from digital copies, but he never did. When I was 12, Sandra announced she was pregnant. The entire household revolved around her condition. My father attended every doctor's appointment, built the nursery himself, and read parenting books aloud to Sandra each night. Jasmine and Tyler were excited about their new sibling. Family discussions centered around baby names and nursery themes. No one asked how I felt about it. Adam was born the summer before I turned 13. He was tiny with a shock of dark hair like my father's. Despite everything, I loved him instantly. He was innocent in all this and part of my father. I offered to help with feedings and diaper changes, partly because I wanted to bond with my half-brother, and partly because I desperately wanted Dad to notice me being helpful. But even this backfired. Soon I was expected to babysit regularly, while Jasmine and Tyler were free to go out with friends. Eden is so good with the baby, Sandra would say, and Jasmine and Tyler need their social development time. Mate, what started as my voluntary help became an obligation, another way I was treated differently from my step-siblings. As Adam grew, he became the center of everyone's world. Dad finally had the son he'd always wanted, though he never said that aloud. I could see it in the way his face lit up when Adam reached for him, the pride in his eyes that I hadn't seen since before Sandra. I tried not to be jealous of a baby, but sometimes watching Dad rock Adam to sleep with such tenderness, I couldn't help but wonder why I wasn't enough. By the time I turned 15, the situation at home had deteriorated completely. Tyler, now 16, had grown taller and more aggressive. What had once been shoves and trips evolved into more violent encounters. He'd wait until we were alone, then twist my arm behind my back until I cried out. "Tell anyone and it'll be worse next time," he'd threaten before releasing me. Jasmine at 18 mostly ignored me now, too occupied with her senior year activities and boyfriend drama to bother with tormenting me. But she remained Sandra's perfect daughter, achieving the good grades and social status Sandra bragged about to her friends. Meanwhile, Adam was 2 and adorable. I still loved him fiercely, reading him stories when I babysat and making him giggle with silly faces. He was the only person in the house who seemed genuinely happy to see me. I sometimes wondered if, had Mom lived, I might have had the same relationship with a sibling that Sandra's children had with each other. The fierce protection, the inside jukes, the unquestioned loyalty. The incident that changed everything happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was carrying my science project downstairs, a detailed model of the solar system I'd spent weeks constructing. Tyler was coming up as I was going down. "Watch out, dork," he said deliberately, moving into my path. "I just need to get this to the car," I said, trying to step around him. Dad promised to drive me to school early to set it up. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. Did he? Because he left 10 minutes ago. Said something about an early meeting. My heart sank. Dad had forgotten again. Before I could respond, Tyler shoved me hard. I lost my balance, the model flying from my hands as I tumbled down the stairs. Pain shot through my wrist as I landed it awkwardly at the bottom, my project scattered in pieces around me. Sandra appeared from the kitchen. "What's all this noise?" she demanded, surveying the scene. Tyler was already halfway down the stairs, expression concerned. "Eden fell, Mom." I tried to grab her, but she was moving too fast. I clutched my throbbing wrist. "He pushed me. He did it on purpose." And Sandra helped me up with a long, suffering sigh. "Always blaming others for your accidents, Eden. Tyler was trying to help you." "No, he wasn't. He pushed me because Dad forgot to take me to school." Tears of pain and frustration welled in my eyes. Sandra examined my wrist, which was already swelling. "We'd better get this looked at," she said, her voice softening slightly. "Tyler, clean up this mess while I take Eden to urgent care." The doctor at urgent care confirmed a sprain wrapping my wrist and prescribing rest and ice. Throughout the visit, Sandra played the concerned stepmother perfectly, but in the car ride home, her true feelings emerged. "Your father works extremely hard to provide for this family," she lectured. "The least you could do is not add to his stress with these fabricated stories about Tyler. He's a good boy who would never hurt anyone." "But he did push me," I insisted. "He's been hurting me for years and you and Dad refused to see it." Sandra's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Your father and I are tired of your attempts to get attention by vilifying my children. When we get home, you'll apologize to Tyler for accusing him." I refused to apologize, which resulted in being grounded for 2 weeks. When Dad finally came home that night, Sandra had already poisoned the well. Eden had an accident with her project and sprained her wrist, she explained. Then she tried to blame poor Tyler, who was actually trying to help her. Dad looked at me, disappointment evident in his eyes. "Is that true, Eden? Are you blaming Tyler for your fall?" "He pushed me, Dad," I said quietly. "He's been hurting me for years, and neither of you will listen." Dad ran a hand through his graying hair. "Eden, this has to stop. Tyler is your brother. This family won't work if you keep trying to drive wedges between everyone." "He's not my brother," I burst out. And this isn't a family. Not for me. The look of anger that crossed Dad's face made me step back. Go to your room, he said coldly. We'll discuss your punishment when you're ready to be reasonable. That weekend, I called Grandma in tears, finally revealing the years of mistreatment. Her voice was tight with anger. Oh, sweetheart, why didn't you tell us sooner? I didn't want to cause problems, I admitted. Dad seems happy with them. Happy people don't let their children be mistreated, Grandma said firmly. Your grandfather and I will speak to your father this weekend. But when my grandparents brought up their concerns, Dad dismissed them. Eden is a teenager now, exaggerating for attention. Sandra's children are perfectly well behaved. The wall between us grew higher. Around this time, I found a part-time job at a local bookstore. The owner, Mrs. Santiago, was a kind woman in her 60s who seemed to sense my unhappiness. The bookstore became my sanctuary, a place where I was valued and respected. I worked every hour I could, saving most of my paychecks in a secret account Mrs. Santiago helped me set up. Everyone needs an escape fund, she told me wisely, especially young women. I hid cash in hollowed-out books on my shelf classics that neither Sandra nor my step-siblings would ever touch. Pride and Prejudice, Jane Eyre, Great Expectations. The irony wasn't lost on me. A month after the staircase incident, my 16th birthday passed almost unnoticed at home. Dad gave me a gift card to a department store clearly purchased at the last minute. There was no party, no cake. In contrast, Jasmine's birthday 2 years earlier had featured a professional photographer, catered food and a new car. That same week, my best friend Zoe's parents invited me to dinner. Watching their easy affection the way they asked Zoe about her day and actually listened to the answer, I realized with painful clarity how abnormal my home life had become. The final breaking point came a week later. I'd been working on a major history paper worth 30% of my grade. I'd left my laptop on my desk while I went to shower. When I returned, I found Tyler in my room, the document open on the screen. "What are you doing?" I demanded, clutching my towel tighter. "Just borrowing your laptop," he said with a smirk, hitting a few keys before standing up. When I checked the document, I found pages of gibberish inserted throughout my carefully researched paper, with no way to recover the original. Hours of work destroyed in seconds. I ran downstairs in a rage, finding Dad and Sandra in the living room. "Tyler just destroyed my history paper," I shouted. "He deleted hours of work." Sandra looked up from her magazine. "Eden Inside Voices, please." I'm sure Tyler did no such thing. "Check the computer," I insisted. He was in my room when I got out of the shower. Dad sighed heavily. "Eden, enough. We've talked about these accusations." "You haven't even looked. You haven't even asked him." I was nearly screaming now. Dad stood up, face flushing with anger. "That's it. You're grounded for another month. No phone, no friends, no job." "My job? You can't do that." "I need that money for college since you're spending it all on them." I gestured toward Tyler, who had appeared in the doorway with a satisfied smirk. "Why can't you just fit in with this family, Dad demanded. "Sandra says you've been difficult since day one." Something snapped inside me. Years of neglect and gaslighting crystallized into cold fury. "Fit in? You want me to fit in with people who destroy my things, who push me downstairs, who pretend my mother never existed?" "Don't you dare talk about Sandra's children that way," Dad growled. And then he did something he'd never done before. He slapped me across the face. The room went silent. My cheek stung, but the pain in my heart was far worse. In that moment, I knew I couldn't stay another day. The father who had once tucked me in and braided my hair was gone, replaced by this angry stranger who had just hit me to defend the boy who tormented me. I walked upstairs without another word, locked my door, and began to pack. Essential clothes. My saved money, important documents I'd had the foresight to gather over months, and the water-damaged photos of my mother. I wrote a brief note to my grandparents telling them I was safe but couldn't live at home anymore. I left nothing for my father. That night, after everyone was asleep, I slipped out the window and walked 3 miles to Zoe's house. Her parents, who had always treated me kindly, let me in without question when I explained through tears what had happened. They gave me their spare bedroom and promised I could stay until we figured things out. The next morning, Zoe's mum called my grandparents, who arrived within hours. The look of devastation on Grandma's face when she saw the mark on my cheek told me everything. I wasn't overreacting. This wasn't normal. This wasn't love. My father's response to my departure was not what I expected. When my grandparents confronted him about the slap and years of neglect, he showed no remorse. "If she wants to leave, she can stay gone," he told them coldly. She's been nothing but trouble since Sandra and I got married. Those words cut deeper than any physical blow. In that moment, I realized he had chosen his new family over me years ago. I was simply making official what had already happened in his heart. With my grandparents' support, I began the process of legal emancipation. At 16, I had a steady job, good grades, and responsible adults willing to vouch for my maturity. The court appointed a guardian ad litem who investigated my claims of neglect and physical abuse. Tyler denied everything, of course, and Sandra painted me as a troubled, jealous child. But my detailed documentation of incidents, the testimony from my grandparents and character references from teachers and Mrs. Santiago swayed the judge. 3 months after leaving home, I was legally emancipated. My father didn't contest it. In fact, he signed the papers without hesitation, officially disowning me. The only condition he set was that I relinquish any claim to child support or future inheritance. I signed immediately, wanting nothing from him but my freedom. I moved in with my grandparents to finish high school. Their modest 3-bedroom bungalow became my safe haven. For the first time in years, I lived with people who genuinely cared about my well-being. Grandma made sure I ate properly and helped me decorate my new room. Grandpa taught me to drive in his old Buick and came to every school event. The transition wasn't easy. I struggled with abandonment issues and crushing self-doubt. Why wasn't I lovable enough for my own father to protect me? What was wrong with me that made it so easy for him to replace me? I had nightmares about falling downstairs while Tyler laughed. I flinched at sudden movements and apologized constantly for minor things like using the last of the milk. My grandparents suggested therapy, and though we couldn't afford much, I attended a support group for teens from troubled homes at the local community centre. Hearing others' stories helped me realise I wasn't alone, that the problem wasn't me but the toxic environment I'd escaped. Despite the emotional turmoil, I excelled academically. School had always been my refuge, and now without the constant stress at home, I thrived. I graduated with honours, earning several small scholarships. They weren't enough for a private university, but combined with my savings from the bookstore and a financial aid package, they made State University possible. Throughout this time, my father made no attempts to contact me. Not on my birthdays, not when I graduated as salutatorian, not when I got accepted to college. Sometimes I'd see Sandra's expensive SUV driving through town, but they never stopped. Occasionally I heard updates through mutual acquaintances. Tyler got arrested for drunk driving but faced no consequences thanks to a family friend who was a judge. Jasmine got engaged to the son of one of Sandra's country club friends. Adam started kindergarten. These snippets of their lives without me were like picking at a scab, painful but hard to resist. I found myself mentally composing letters to my father that I never sent. In some, I raged at his betrayal. In others, I begged him to explain how he could choose them over his own daughter. Eventually, I stopped writing these imaginary letters and focused on building my new life. College presented its own challenges. While other freshmen worried about homesickness, I had no home to miss. When family weekend arrived, I had only my elderly grandparents, while others had parents, siblings, even extended relatives. But I made friends who became like family, particularly my roommate Alicia, whose own parents had divorced messily, leaving her with similar trust issues. I worked multiple jobs throughout college. Barista in the morning, library assistant in the afternoon, waitress on weekends. The schedule was exhausting but necessary. Unlike my step-siblings, I wouldn't have tuition and expenses handed to me. Every textbook, every meal plan payment, every utility bill was my responsibility. In my sophomore year, Mrs. Santiago from the bookstore called with surprising news. A regular customer of hers was a retired professor who ran a small foundation providing scholarships for students who had overcome significant obstacles. She had recommended me, and after reviewing my application and personal essay, the foundation offered me a grant that covered half my remaining tuition. This financial breathing room allowed me to reduce my work hours and focus more on my studies. I majored in business with a concentration in finance, discovering an aptitude for investment strategies and financial planning. The stability and control of numbers appealed to me after the chaos and unpredictability of my childhood. My junior year, I secured a competitive internship at a regional investment firm. The work was challenging but rewarding, and my supervisor, Mr. Finley, became another mentor figure in my life. He praised my attention to detail and ability to explain complex financial concepts in accessible terms. When the internship ended, he offered me a part-time position I could maintain while completing my degree. Throughout these years, my grandparents remained my rock. They attended every college event they could send care packages during finals and welcomed me home during breaks. Their unwavering support helped heal wounds I thought would never close. After graduation, the investment firm offered me a full-time position with a salary that seemed astronomical after years of scraping by. I moved into a small apartment near the office and began building my client base. The work ethic and resilience I developed through necessity served me well in the financial world. Within 2 years, I was promoted to junior advisor with my own set of clients. I met Nathan at a charity golf tournament the firm sponsored. He was volunteering as a photographer, capturing candid shots of participants for the event's website. We chatted briefly as he took photos of my group, and later at the reception, he sought me out to continue our conversation. What struck me immediately was how attentively he listened, how he asked follow-up questions that showed genuine interest. Nathan's family was everything mine wasn't. His parents, still happily married after 30 years, welcomed me warmly when we began dating. His sister teased him in the good-natured way siblings should. Family dinners were lively affairs with multiple conversations happening simultaneously, everyone's voice equally valued. The first time I joined them for a holiday meal, I nearly cried at the normalcy of it all, the easy affection that flowed between them. Our relationship progressed steadily. Nathan understood my trust issues and never pushed for more than I could give. He respected my boundaries and celebrated my successes. When I was promoted again at 25, he organized a surprise party with our friends. When I had nightmares about my past, he held me without demanding explanations. By 27, I had built a life I could be proud of. I owned a small but beautiful home, had a thriving career as a financial advisor, maintained close relationships with my grandparents and friends, and was engaged to a man who loved me completely. The scared 16-year-old who had climbed out a window with nothing but a backpack seemed like someone from another lifetime. Then on an ordinary Tuesday morning, my carefully constructed world tilted on its axis. An unknown number appeared on my phone, and something made me answer instead of letting it go to voicemail as I usually did with unfamiliar callers. "Hello, Eden. It's your father." 10 years of silence, and now he needed my help. The irony wasn't lost on me as I sat in my office phone pressed to my ear, listening to the voice that had once been the center of my world. "Eden, I need your help," he said without preamble. His voice sounded older, rougher than I remembered, but still unmistakably his. I couldn't speak for a moment, my mind racing to process this sudden intrusion from my past. "Why are you calling me?" I finally managed my voice steadier than I felt. "It's Adam," he said. "He's sick. Leukemia." A cold weight settled in my stomach. Adam. My half-brother who would be 14 now. The innocent baby I had loved despite everything else. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully, "but I don't understand why you're calling me after all this time." Dad sighed heavily. "The insurance won't cover an experimental treatment his doctors are recommending. We need $75,000 and we've exhausted all our options." The pieces clicked into place. "So you found me because you need money. Not because he missed me, not because he regretted his choices, not because he wanted to make amends. I found you on social media," he admitted. "Your profile is public. I saw you're doing well financially." He cleared his throat. "Your family, Eden. Family helps family. Family helps family." The words echoed mockingly in my head. Where was this family sentiment when Tyler was shoving me downstairs? When my father slapped me for speaking the truth? When he signed away his parental rights without a second thought? "I need time to think about this," I said, unable to process everything in the moment. "How can I reach you?" He gave me his number, then added awkwardly, "Adam asks about you sometimes. He remembers his big sister, who used to read him stories." The emotional manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. Almost. Instead, I ended the call with a non-committal promise to consider his request. I sat at my desk for a long time afterward, staring unseeing at my computer screen. Part of me wanted to block his number and pretend the call never happened. Another part thought of a 14-year-old boy fighting cancer innocent of his parents' sins, and a small wounded part of me still longed for my father's approval even after everything. That evening, I told Nathan about the call. We were preparing dinner in our kitchen, the familiar routine of chopping vegetables and stirring sauces, usually calming after a workday. But my hands shook as I recounted my father's words. "What do you want to do?" Nathan asked when I finished, his expression concerned but supportive. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to tell him to go to hell after what he put me through. But Adam is innocent in all this. He's just a kid. Nathan set down the wooden spoon he was using and took my hands in his. You don't have to decide right now, and whatever you choose, I'll support you completely. The next day I called my grandparents. Though they'd never directly criticised my father in my presence, their silence on the subject spoke volumes. Now faced with this situation, I needed their perspective. He called us too, Grandma admitted, right after he spoke to you. What did you tell him? I asked, surprised. That we needed to think about it, Grandpa said, his normally jovial voice tight with anger. Eden, we've maintained contact with Adam over the years. Birthday cards, Christmas gifts. Sandra allows it barely. But we haven't seen him in person since he was 5. This was news to me. They'd never mentioned this ongoing connection, probably to spare my feelings. Is he really sick? I asked quietly. Yes, Grandma confirmed. We checked with Sandra's mother, who we occasionally run into at church. Adam has been in treatment for months. I arranged to meet my father at a coffee shop downtown Neutral Territory, where I could maintain my composure. I arrived early, selecting a table in the corner with a clear view of the entrance. When he walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. The man who approached my table looked 20 years older than the father I remembered. His hair was completely grey, now his face deeply lined, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. He wore a worn button-down shirt that had seen better days and carried a battered leather briefcase. Eden, he said, his voice catching. You look so much like your mother. I gestured to the chair across from me, not trusting myself to speak yet. He sat down heavily, placing the briefcase on the floor beside him. Thank you for meeting me, he began. I know this is unexpected. That's one word for it, I replied, wrapping my hands around my coffee mug to stop their trembling. 10 years of silence, and now you need money. He flinched at my directness. It's not that simple. Then explain it to me, I challenged. Explain why you're suddenly reaching out now when you had no problem signing away your rights to me when I was 16. He looked down at his hands. I made mistakes, Eden. Terrible mistakes. That's not an explanation, I said coldly. That's an evasion. His eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw a glimmer of the father I'd once adored. After your mother died, I was lost. Sandra seemed like salvation. She was confident, organised, everything I wasn't. When we married, I convinced myself we could be a perfect blended family. But we weren't, I prompted when he fell silent. No, he admitted. Things were complicated. Sandra felt you resented her taking your mother's place. I never resented her for that, I interrupted. I resented her for playing favourites and ignoring the abuse her son inflicted on me. Dad's expression hardened slightly. Tyler had his own issues adjusting. You both struggled with the new family dynamic. I fought to keep my voice even. He pushed me down a flight of stairs, Dad. That's not struggling with family dynamics. That's assault. I didn't come here to rehash the past, he said defensively. I came about Adam. The past is why we're sitting here having this conversation instead of me already writing a check, I countered. You can't erase 10 years of abandonment and expect me to just hand over $75,000. He reached for his briefcase and pulled out a folder. These are Adam's medical records and information about the treatment program. He slid them across the table, then reached back into the case and withdrew a small photo album. And these are pictures of Adam. I thought you might want to see him. The manipulation was so transparent it made my stomach turn. Still, I couldn't help looking at the photos. A grinning boy with a skateboard, a paler version of that same boy in a hospital bed of Vol attached to his arm. The resemblance to my father was striking the same dark hair and eyes I saw in the mirror every day. How are Jasmine and Tyler doing? I asked, changing the subject abruptly. Dad seemed thrown by the question. They're good. Jasmine is married now, living in Chicago. She's an event planner. Tyler finished his business degree last year. He's working at my firm. Yes. Did you pay for their college? I asked, already knowing the answer. Well, yes. Sandra and I always planned to pay for all the kids' education. He shifted uncomfortably. All the kids except me, I clarified. That was different. You chose to leave. The casual rewriting of history stunned me. I left because I was being abused and you did nothing to stop it. In fact, you participated in it. That's an exaggeration, he dismissed. We've always taken care of our own. There it was, the line that revealed everything. We've always taken care of our own, not our children or our family, but our own. The distinction was clear. I had never been one of their own. And yet here you are asking me for money, I pointed out. This is different. Adam is fighting for his life. And I was fighting for mine when I left, I countered. But that was just kids' stuff, right? I was too sensitive, wasn't I? Dad ran a hand over his face. What do you want from me? Eden, an apology. Fine, I'm sorry. We didn't handle things perfectly. Now will you help your brother? The insincerity of his apology made my decision clear. I need time to think about this, I said, standing up. I'll call you in a few days. Over the next week, I did my research. I spoke with a college friend who had become an oncologist. I consulted a medical billing specialist at my firm. I talked extensively with Nathan and my grandparents, and I made a decision that would honour both my principles and my compassion. I asked my father to meet me again at the same coffee shop. This time I brought a folder of my own. I've decided I will help with Adam's treatment. I began watching relief flood his face. But there are conditions. I slid a document across the table. This is a proposal for how this will work. I won't be giving you the money directly. I'll pay the treatment centre myself, ensuring the funds go exactly where they're needed. But before I do that, I need several things from you. Dad skimmed the document, his expression darkening. What is this? My terms, I said calmly. First, I want a written acknowledgement of the neglect and abuse I suffered in your home, including Tyler's physical assaults and your failure to protect me. Second, I want a formal apology for disowning me. Third, I want you and Adam to attend family therapy sessions with me, supervised by a professional of my choosing. This is blackmail, he sputtered, face reddening. No, I corrected him. This is establishing boundaries. You abandoned me when I needed you most. Now you need me, and these are my conditions for helping. I'm not doing this to punish you. I'm doing it because if we're going to have any kind of relationship moving forward, it has to be based on truth and accountability. Dad pushed the document back toward me. You're blackmailing me when my son is dying, he accused, voice rising. Several coffee shop patrons glanced our way, but I remained calm. I'm offering to pay for his treatment. I'm just not willing to do it in a way that enables you to continue pretending you didn't fail me as a father. He stood up abruptly, grabbing his briefcase. Either you help family, no questions asked, or you're not my daughter, he declared. I looked up at him, feeling strangely peaceful. I haven't been your daughter for 10 years, Dad. That was your choice, not mine. He stormed out without another word. I sat there finishing my coffee, a mixture of sadness and relief washing over me. I had offered help on terms that protected my well-being. If he couldn't accept that the failure was his, not mine. A week later, the texts began. First from Jasmine. How dare you use Adam's illness to get revenge? You always were a selfish little bitch. Then from Tyler. Dad should never have contacted you. Some people aren't worth the effort. I blocked both numbers without responding. Then came the call from my grandparents. Dad had contacted them with his own ultimatum. If they attended my upcoming wedding, he would cut them off from seeing Adam completely. They were devastated, torn between their love for me and their desire to maintain what little connection they had with their only grandson. We're coming to your wedding, Eden, Grandma said firmly. Thomas can't keep using Adam as a pawn to control everyone. But I could hear the pain in her voice, the impossible position my father had put them in. The guilt was overwhelming. These wonderful people who had saved me, who had given me a home, when I had none, were now being punished for loving me. Then came the social media posts. Dad rarely used Facebook, but suddenly he was posting emotional updates about Adam's condition, with vague references to selfish relatives who refused to help a child in need. He didn't name me, but mutual acquaintances knew exactly who he meant. I received several confused messages asking why I wouldn't help my brother. The last straw was when Sandra created a GoFundMe campaign for Adam's treatment, complete with heart-wrenching photos and a story that painted them as loving parents who had exhausted every option. The campaign mentioned family members who had turned their backs on a child in need. I was furious, but determined not to sink to their level. Instead, I channeled my anger productively. I researched alternative treatment options and financial assistance programs for pediatric cancer patients. I found 3 promising leads, a clinical trial at a renowned research hospital that was accepting new patients, a national foundation that provided grants specifically for experimental treatments, and a hospital payment plan that could make the costs manageable. I compiled all this information along with application instructions and had it sent anonymously to my father's address. I would not let Adam suffer because of the adults' conflict, even if I couldn't be directly involved in helping him. Meanwhile, wedding preparations continued. Nathan's family, aware of the situation, enveloped me in extra love and support. My friends rallied around me, ensuring that every wedding task was infused with joy rather than stress, and my grandparents stood firm in their decision to attend, though I could see the toll my father's ultimatum was taking on them. I hired security for the wedding venue, providing them with photos of my father, Sandra, Tyler, and Jasmine. I wouldn't put it past them to try to create a scene on my wedding day. The precaution saddened me, but it was necessary for peace of mind. As the wedding approached, I made a final decision regarding my father and his family. I would maintain no contact moving forward. The brief re-entry into my life had reopened old wounds and created new ones. For my own well-being, I needed to close that door permanently, while keeping my heart open to the possibility that someday Adam might seek me out on his own terms. My wedding day dawned clear and beautiful. After years of uncertainty and struggle, I was marrying a man who loved me completely, surrounded by people who had chosen to be in my life rather than obligated by blood. Nathan's parents treated me like the daughter they never had. My grandparents beamed with pride as they prepared to walk me down the aisle together. My friends from college and work had travelled from across the country to celebrate with us. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock in a botanical garden near our home. I spent the morning getting ready with my bridesmaids, trying to focus on the joy of the day rather than the shadow of my father's absence. Not that I wanted him there after everything, but the little girl in me who had once adored her daddy couldn't help feeling the loss of what should have been. "You look absolutely beautiful," Grandma said, tears in her eyes, as she helped adjust my veil. At 78, she moved more slowly now, but her eyes were as bright and loving as ever. "Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become." Grandpa added, his voice thick with emotion, so strong and compassionate despite everything. The ceremony was intimate and personal. Nathan and I had written our own vows, promises of support and understanding that acknowledged the difficult paths that had brought us together. When Grandma and Grandpa walked me down the aisle, their steps slow but determined, I felt wrapped in the purest love I had ever known. After the ceremony, during the reception, the maitre d' approached me with an uncertain expression. "There's a young man asking to see you. He says he's your brother, but he's not on the guest list." My heart lurched. "What does he look like?" "Teenager, dark hair, thin, says his name is Adam." I exchanged glances with Nathan, who squeezed my hand supportively. "It's your call, love." "I'll see him," I decided. "In the garden room, please. And could you ask my grandparents to join us?" The boy who entered the garden room looked both like and unlike the photos my father had shown me. He was taller than I expected, painfully thin, his complexion pale. A baseball cap covered what I assumed was hair loss from treatment, but his eyes were unmistakable. My father's eyes. My eyes. "Adam," I said softly. He nodded, looking nervous. "Hi, Eden. I'm sorry for crashing your wedding. I needed to meet you." My grandparents entered behind him, both stopping short at the sight of the grandson they hadn't seen in years. "Adam," Grandma's voice quavered. "Oh my goodness, look how you've grown." Adam turned, his face lighting up with recognition. "Grandma, Grandpa." He moved toward them hesitantly, then found himself enveloped in their embrace. After the emotional reunion, we all sat down. Adam explained that he'd found my address on a piece of mail in his father's office. "I've been curious about you for years," he admitted. "Dad and Sandra don't talk about you much, but sometimes I'd overhear things, and I have these vague memories of someone reading me stories with funny voices." "That was me," I confirmed with a smile. "You loved The Very Hungry Caterpillar. I had to read it every night." Adam looked down at his hands. "I know Dad came to see you about my treatment. He wouldn't tell me what happened, just that you refused to help." I chose my words carefully. "That's not exactly what happened, Adam. I offered to pay for your treatment directly, but with conditions that Dad wasn't willing to accept." "What conditions?" he asked. "That's between your father and me," I said gently. "But I want you to know that I've never forgotten you, and I never blamed you for anything that happened between the adults in our lives." Adam nodded, seeming to understand I wouldn't disparage his father to him. "The weird thing is," he continued, "right after Dad came back from seeing you, the second time we got all this information about a clinical trial at Hopkins. I got accepted, and it's working really well. The doctors are amazed by how I'm responding." I kept my face neutral, but inside I was relieved. The anonymous information I'd sent had reached them and helped. "Dad doesn't know I'm here," Adam confessed. "He and Sandra think I'm at a friend's house. They'd be really mad if they knew." "We won't tell them," Grandpa assured him, but you shouldn't make a habit of lying to your parents, even for good reasons. Adam looked at me earnestly. I just wanted to meet my sister on her wedding day. Is that okay? It's more than okay, I said, my throat tight with emotion. It's the best wedding gift I could have received. We exchanged phone numbers before Adam left with a promise to stay in touch discreetly. I invited him to contact me directly anytime he wanted to talk separate from the complicated relationships with our parents. After he departed, I rejoined my wedding reception with a lighter heart, dancing with Nathan until my feet hurt. In the weeks and months that followed, I maintained regular text conversations with Adam. He shared updates about his treatment, which continued to show promising results. I sent him books I thought he might enjoy and listened when he needed to vent about normal teenage frustrations. Our relationship grew slowly but steadily, built on mutual respect rather than obligation. My own healing journey continued as well. The therapy I had begun years before took on new dimensions as I processed my father's brief re-entry into my life. I learned to recognize the patterns of thought that still plagued me. The lingering belief that I was somehow unworthy of love, the tendency to over-explain myself, the fear that those I loved would eventually abandon me. Nathan's patience and unwavering support helped immensely. He never dismissed my feelings or told me to just get over it. Instead, he reminded me through consistent action that not everyone leaves, that I was worthy of love exactly as I was, that my boundaries deserved respect. My relationship with my grandparents deepened further. As they aged, Nathan and I took on more responsibility for their care, accompanying them to medical appointments and helping maintain their home. The roles had reversed from when they had sheltered and protected me, but the love remained constant. 6 months after our wedding, we learnt that Adam's cancer was in remission. He sent me a selfie from the hospital, grinning widely with a thumbs up. I framed it and placed it on my desk at work, a reminder that sometimes, even in the most broken families, connection is possible. My father never contacted me again. Through Adam, I learnt that he and Sandra had separated briefly during the stress of Adam's illness, but reconciled after his health improved. Jasmine had her first child, making my father a grandfather. Tyler was engaged to the daughter of one of his father's business associates. Life went on for them as it did for me, our paths running parallel but separate. The journey from that terrified 16-year-old climbing out a window to the confident woman I am today wasn't easy or straightforward. There were setbacks and dark moments, times when the weight of abandonment threatened to overwhelm me. But through it all, I learned that family isn't always defined by blood. It's defined by who shows up, who stays, who loves you through your worst moments and celebrates your best. I no longer wait for my father's approval or mourn what might have been. Instead, I focus on the family I've chosen and who has chosen me, Nathan, my grandparents, my friends, and now, in a careful, growing way, Adam. Breaking the cycle of toxicity means recognizing that you can't control others' actions, only your own response. It means setting boundaries that protect your heart while keeping it open to those who deserve access. Most importantly, it means accepting that your worth isn't determined by those who failed to see it, but by the truth of who you are, and the courage it takes to stand firm in that truth. I still have the water-damaged photos of my mother. They sit in a beautiful new album next to pictures from my wedding, images of my grandparents, snapshots of Nathan and me on vacation, a few cautious photos with Adam. Together, they tell the story not just of what was lost, but of what has been found and built from the ashes of the past. Have you ever had to create boundaries with family members who hurt you, or found yourself rebuilding your life after a major betrayal? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember, sharing our experiences helps others feel less alone in their struggles. Please like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they deserve better. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that your story isn't defined by those who hurt you, but by your own strength and resilience.